The great chamber floated in the void between stars, a structure so old that entire civilizations had risen and fallen in the time it took to build. Inside, 5 beings of immense age and power gathered around a table made of solidified light. They were the Council of Elders, and today they faced a crisis that made their ancient hearts heavy with dread. Kalesa spoke first. Her crystalline body refracted the starlight into 1,000 colors as she moved. She had lived for 200,000 years, and in all that time, she had never felt fear like this. Her voice echoed through the chamber, carrying the weight of ages. The sensors do not lie. The quantum disturbances are unmistakable. Something stirs in the Sol system. The other elders shifted uncomfortably. Thundra, a being of pure energy contained within a magnetic field, pulsed with concern. Mordecai clicked his mandibles in the ancient gesture of worry. Silden's leaves rustled despite the absence of wind, and Nexus Prime, the ancient artificial intelligence, simply dimmed his lights in acknowledgement. "It has been 50,000 years, Nexus Prime said, his voice like distant thunder. "We all agreed. We all made the pact. Humanity must not be disturbed." But the chamber was not empty of others. Around the great table sat representatives of younger races, civilizations that had reached the stars only 10 or 20,000 years ago. They were powerful in their own right, commanding vast fleets and controlling hundreds of worlds. And they were growing impatient with the old warnings. Ambassador Zekthar of the Kryn Empire stood up. His scaled body gleamed under the artificial lights, and his eyes showed nothing but contempt. The Kryn were conquerors, proud and strong. They had never lost a war, never faced an enemy they could not crush. "With respect, honored elders," Zekthar said, though his tone carried no respect at all, "we have heard these warnings for generations. Stories of the terrible humans who once burned the galaxy. But we have searched your databases. We have seen their world. They are primitive. They fight among themselves with chemical explosives and metal projectiles. Their fastest ships barely leave their own planet's orbit." "You see only what they allow you to see," Kalesa warned. Her voice grew sharp, cutting through the murmurs of agreement that followed Zekthar's words. "The protocols exist for a reason." "The protocols are old superstitions," another ambassador said. "Fairy tales to scare children." Kalesa rose to her full height, and for a moment, the younger races remembered why the elders commanded respect. Her form blazed with light that hurt to look upon. "I was there," she said, and her voice made the chamber tremble. "I watched 17 worlds burn. I saw stars go dark. I witnessed weapons that tore the fabric of space itself. And when it was over, when the humans realized what they had done, I saw them weep." The chamber fell silent. Even Zekthar seemed momentarily subdued. "They came to us," Kalesa continued, her light dimming to something bearable. "The human leaders came to us with tears streaming down their faces. They had not known, you see. They had not understood that the weapons they fired in self-defense would cascade, would spread, would destroy so much more than their targets. 17 worlds, billions of lives, gone in moments." Mordecai spoke then, his voice like grinding stones. "And they made a choice. They did not have to. They could have continued their expansion. They were stronger than all of us combined. But they chose differently. They dismantled their empire," Sil then added, her voice like wind through forests. "They destroyed their weapons. They went home to their single world and swore an oath. Never again would they bring unprovoked war to the stars. They asked us to seal their system, to quarantine them, to let them sleep until they had learned wisdom. And we agreed." Nexus Prime finished. "We made a pact. Leave humanity alone, and they will leave the galaxy alone. For 50,000 years this pact has held. For 50,000 years the galaxy has known relative peace." But Zekthar was not convinced. None of the younger races were. They saw opportunity where the elders saw danger. The Sol system was rich in resources. Earth itself was a paradise world, and if the humans were truly as primitive as they appeared, then claiming their system would be easy. "I call for a vote," Zekthar announced. "The Kryn Empire moves that we send a diplomatic expedition to the Sol system. We will offer humanity a place in the Galactic Concordat. If they accept, we gain a new member world. If they refuse, we will enforce the laws of the Concordat as we do with all isolated worlds." The vote was swift. The younger races had the numbers. One by one they voted yes. The elders abstained, as was their right. They did not vote yes, but they did not have the power to vote no on behalf of the entire Concordat. When the vote was final, Kalesa dimmed her light until she was barely visible. Thundra collapsed in on himself. Morkai's mandibles drooped, Sildon's leaves turned brown at the edges, and Nexus Prime's lights flickered like a dying star. "So be it," Kalissa said quietly. "You have made your choice. You have chosen silence when you should have listened. May the Void have mercy on us all." Zekthar smiled as he left the chamber. Behind him he heard Nexus Prime whisper to Kalissa, words meant only for the elders. "Should we warn them again?" "We have warned them for 50,000 years, Kalissa replied. "They will not listen to words. Perhaps they will listen to what comes next. And if humanity has forgotten mercy?" There was a long pause before Kalissa answered. When she did, her voice was hollow with dread. "Then we are all already dead. We just do not know it yet." The chamber emptied slowly. The younger races left excited, already planning their expedition to Earth. The elders remained, 5 ancient beings staring at the stars, remembering fire and screams and the day the humans had wept for what they had done. Somewhere in the Sol system, sensors detected the vote. Deep in the crust of Earth, in bunkers that had waited 50,000 years, lights began to turn on. Hibernation pods opened, weapon systems performed diagnostic checks, and in a command center buried beneath what had once been called the Pacific Ocean, Admiral Chen opened her eyes for the first time in 50 millennia. She had known this day would come. They all had. Humanity had hoped it would not. They had prayed for it, but they had prepared for the alternative. The long sleep was over. Humanity was awake. And the galaxy would soon remember why the elders had warned them. 6 months had passed since the vote. The Kryn Empire had assembled a fleet that made their admirals proud. 300 warships hung in formation at the edge of the Sol system, their weapons charged and their shields at full power. General Vexnor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Conquering Dawn, and smiled at what his sensors showed him. One small blue planet, a few orbital stations, some primitive satellites. This would be the easiest conquest in Kryn history. "Send the standard message," Vexnor ordered. "Inform them that the Galactic Concordat offers them one chance to join peacefully. If they refuse, we will take their world by force." The communications officer nodded and sent the transmission. Then they waited. In Kryn military doctrine, conquered species usually responded within minutes. Either they begged for mercy, or they made foolish threats. Either way, the outcome was always the same. But Earth did not respond in minutes. An hour passed, then 2. Vexnor's smile began to fade. His officers shifted nervously at their stations. "Send it again," he ordered. "Perhaps their technology is too primitive to receive it properly." The message was sent again. This time the response came quickly. It was a single line of text, transmitted on all frequencies in every language the Concordat had ever recorded. "You were warned." Vexnor laughed. His officers joined in, the tension breaking. What kind of response was that? Where were the pleas for mercy? Where were the desperate negotiations? "Scan the planet again," Vexnor said, still chuckling. "Show me their defenses. Let us see what these humans think will stop us." The sensor officer worked his console and the results appeared on the main screen. Earth was surrounded by 12 orbital platforms, evenly spaced around the planet. They were large, certainly, but only 12 against 300 warships? It was almost insulting. "Target those platforms," Vexnor ordered. "Destroy them and then we will—" He never finished the sentence. The 12 platforms opened fire first. What came from those platforms was not supposed to exist. Beams of twisted space that made ships fold in on themselves, missiles that phased out of normal reality and reappeared inside enemy vessels, projectiles that carried miniature black holes in their cores, energy weapons that burned hotter than stars. The Kryn fleet had shields designed to stop anything known to galactic science. Those shields lasted approximately 3 seconds. The first salvo destroyed 40 ships outright. The second salvo, coming mere seconds later, took out 60 more. The Kryn fleet scattered, captains screaming orders, trying to return fire, trying to understand what was happening. But the platforms were not the only threat. As Vexnor watched in horror, his sensors detected ships rising from Earth itself. They had been hidden somehow, invisible to every scan the Kryn had performed. 12 ships matching the number of platforms, but each one radiating power signatures that exceeded anything in the Kryn database. The human ships moved like nothing Vexnor had ever seen. They dodged weapons fire that should have been impossible to dodge. They accelerated and turned with forces that should have crushed their crews. They fought with a precision that seemed almost supernatural, Fall back, Vexnor finally screamed. All ships retreat to jump distance. But retreat was not so simple. The human ships had surrounded them somehow, cutting off escape routes. The platforms continued their relentless barrage. And worst of all, the humans were not simply destroying ships. They were targeting engines, weapons, and shields with surgical precision. They were disabling vessels, not obliterating them. They were showing mercy, and somehow that was more terrifying than pure destruction would have been. Through the chaos, a transmission came through to the conquering dawn. A human face appeared on the screen. She wore a simple uniform of dark blue, and her expression was cold and calm. Behind her, Vexnor could see a bridge that hummed with technology far beyond anything the Kryn possessed. I am Admiral Chen of the Terran Defense Coalition, the woman said. Her voice was steady, utterly devoid of emotion. You have violated our space. You have threatened our world. You were warned not to do this. The elders told you, but you did not listen. Vexnor tried to speak, but his voice would not come. He could only watch as his fleet died around him. We left the galaxy 50,000 years ago, Admiral Chen continued. We left because we had become monsters. Because we had built weapons that could kill worlds, and we had used them without understanding the consequences. We swore we would never do that again. We swore we would stay hidden, stay quiet until we had learned wisdom. Another dozen Kryn ships went dark on Vexnor's tactical display. And we have learned, Chen said. We have had 50,000 years to think, to study, to prepare. We knew that someday someone would come. Someone would not listen to the warnings. Someone would force us to remember what we once were. She leaned forward, and for the first time, Vexnor saw emotion in her eyes. It was not anger. It was sadness. We are disabling your ships, not destroying them. We are letting your crews live. This is the mercy we learned. But make no mistake, General Vexnor. If you force us to do more, we have weapons that make these platforms look like toys. We have technology that would make the elders weep, and we have the will to use them if we must. The battle was over. Of 300 Kryn warships, only 23 remained functional enough to limp away. The rest floated dead in space, their crews alive, but their ships completely disabled. Take your survivors and go, Admiral Chen said. Return to the Concordat. Tell them what happened here, and tell them this: humanity is awake. We did not want this. We wanted to sleep forever. But you have made that impossible. Now you will face the consequences. Vexnor found his voice at last. What? What are you? Admiral Chen's expression did not change. We are what happens when a species learns from its mistakes. We are what you get when you ignore warnings. And most importantly, General, we are what the elders told you to leave alone. The transmission ended. The human ships and platforms went silent, their weapons powering down. They simply waited, watching as the surviving Kryn vessels gathered their disabled comrades and prepared to flee. On Earth, in the command center deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, Admiral Chen turned to her crew. They were men and women who had been born 50,000 years ago, who had trained their entire lives for war and then chosen peace, who had slept through ages of galactic history waiting for this moment. Send a message to the Concordat, she ordered. Use all channels. Make sure everyone hears it. The communications officer nodded. What should it say, Admiral? Chen looked at the tactical display, at the fleeing Kryn ships, at the 12 platforms that had defended Earth so easily. She thought about the weapons still hidden, the ships still sleeping, the warriors still in hibernation. She thought about everything humanity had prepared, everything they had hoped never to use. Tell them humanity is awake, she said quietly. Tell them we remember everything. And tell them we remember why we left. The message was sent. Across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds and in 1,000,000 ships, people received it and felt a chill run through them. The elders had warned them. The ancient protocols had been clear, but they had not listened. Now, as the younger races watched the recordings of the battle, as they saw the impossible weapons and the unstoppable ships, they began to understand. The warnings had not been superstition. The protocols had not been paranoia. They had been mercy. The elders' mercy, and humanity's. And now that mercy was coming to an end. The Galactic Concordat was in chaos. In the 3 days since the Kryn fleet had limped back from Earth, the entire political structure of the galaxy had begun to crack. Emergency sessions were called. Ambassadors screamed at each other across the great chamber. And in the middle of it all, the Council of Elders sat in silence, watching the younger races tear themselves apart with panic. Nexus Prime finally spoke, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "We told you." The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned to the elders. "For 50,000 years," Kalessa said, her crystalline form glowing dimly, "we have kept the truth locked in our deepest archives. We did this as a kindness to humanity, to let them be forgotten, to let the galaxy move on without fear. But you would not listen, you would not trust, and now the seal is broken." She gestured and holographic images filled the chamber, ancient recordings preserved from an age when the galaxy was younger. The younger races watched in growing horror as the true history of humanity unfolded before their eyes. They saw human ships, thousands of them, spreading across the stars. They saw human colonies on worlds that now belonged to other species. They saw a human empire that controlled a third of the known galaxy, not through conquest but through trade and cooperation. Humanity had been explorers first, builders second, and warriors only when necessary. And then they saw the first contact wars. The recording showed alien fleets attacking human colonies without warning. "A misunderstanding," the historical note said, "a translation error that led to tragedy. The aliens had thought humans were claiming their territory. Humans had thought they were being welcomed. The first battles were conventional, ships against ships, weapons that burned and exploded but did not threaten the fabric of reality itself. Humans fought back, defending their colonies, trying to negotiate even as they died. But then came the moment that changed everything. A human research station, working on experimental weapons, was about to be overrun. In desperation, they activated a device that was not ready, a weapon they did not fully understand. They called it the Cascade Generator. The weapon worked. It destroyed the attacking fleet instantly. But it did not stop there. The energy cascade spread, jumping from ship to ship through their faster-than-light drives. It followed those ships when they tried to escape. It traced back to their home worlds. And it kept spreading. By the time human scientists understood what was happening, it was too late. 17 worlds burned. Not just burned, erased. Every living thing on those worlds simply ceased to exist, their molecules torn apart at the quantum level. Billions of lives gone in the span of hours. The recording showed human leaders receiving the news, showed them collapsing in grief, showed them begging the other races for forgiveness. The war ended instantly. Humanity offered everything: territory, technology, reparations, anything to atone for the horror they had unleashed. But the damage was done. The galaxy feared them, and humanity, looking at what they had become, feared themselves. "They came to us," Morkai said, his ancient voice heavy with memory. The human leaders came to the council and made a proposal. They would dismantle their empire. They would destroy their weapons. They would return to Earth and seal themselves away. They asked us to quarantine their system, to make sure no one disturbed them, to let them sleep until they had learned to be better. We agreed, Sil then added. We made the protocols. We swore to protect their isolation, and humanity kept their word. For 50,000 years they have stayed on their one world, building nothing, expanding nowhere, threatening no one. Thundra pulsed with somber energy, or so we thought. Nexus Prime activated another recording. This one was recent, taken from the Kryn ship's sensor logs during the battle at Earth. The younger races leaned forward, watching carefully. "Look at their technology," Nexus Prime said. "Look at those weapons. Those ships, that is not the work of a species that has been sleeping. That is the work of a species that has been preparing." The truth settled over the chamber like a physical weight. Humanity had never truly stopped. They had simply hidden. For 50,000 years they had been observing the galaxy, learning, studying, and advancing. While they appeared primitive to casual scans, they had been building defenses that made them untouchable. They did not want war, Kalessa said softly. They truly wanted peace. But they are not fools. They knew that someday someone might come. Someone might not listen to the warnings. So they prepared, and now that preparation has been revealed. Ambassador Zekthar stood, his scales dull with shame. "What do we do?" Before anyone could answer, new alerts began flashing throughout the chamber. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy. Human ships had been detected. Not invading, not attacking, just appearing one by one in orbit around major worlds. They broadcast no messages, made no threats. They simply watched, and that was somehow more terrifying than an invasion would have been. They are showing us their reach, Nexus Prime observed, showing us that they can go anywhere they want, that our defenses mean nothing to them. But not everyone was willing to accept this new reality. In the outer sectors, 30 younger civilizations met in secret. They called themselves the Coalition of Free Worlds, though their freedom was questionable at best. Many were dictatorships, slave-holding empires, and aggressive expansionists. They saw humanity not as a threat to be feared, but as a threat to be eliminated. "We strike first," declared Supreme Commander Rathzul of the Drex hegemony. "We gather our fleets. All of them. 12,000 ships. We hit Earth before they can prepare. We end this now." The coalition agreed. Messages were sent. Fleets began to gather, and on Earth Admiral Chen watched the preparations with tired eyes. "They still do not understand," she said to her second-in-command, Captain Torres. "They still think this is about strength. About numbers. Should we warn them off?" Torres asked. Chen shook her head. "We have sent enough warnings." The elders warned them. "We warned them. They chose not to listen. Now they must learn. And if they keep coming? If they refuse to stop?" Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment, staring at the tactical display that showed 12,000 ships converging on Earth. When she spoke, her voice was filled with a sadness that came from ancient memory, from genetic inheritance, from the ghosts of 17 worlds that still haunted humanity's collective consciousness. "Then we show them why we left. We show them the weapons we swore never to use. We show them what mercy really means." She turned to face Torres and her eyes were hard. "And we pray that they surrender before we have to show them what we are capable of when mercy runs out." Deep in Earth's crust, in vaults that had been sealed for 50 millennia, ancient weapon systems came online. Humanity had promised never to bring unprovoked war to the stars. But this war had been provoked, and humanity had learned, over 50,000 years of meditation and preparation, that sometimes peace could only be achieved through the demonstration of overwhelming force. The coalition fleet jumped into the Sol system 3 days later, weapons hot and shields up. They found humanity waiting for them, not with 12 platforms this time, not with 12 ships, but with a force that made the younger races finally understand what the elders had been trying to tell them all along. Humanity had never been sleeping. They had been preparing, and now the galaxy would see what 50,000 years of preparation looked like. The Coalition of Free Worlds arrived in the Sol system with confidence born of numbers. 12,000 warships representing 30 different civilizations filled the void of space like a metal storm. Supreme Commander Rathzul stood on the bridge of his flagship and smiled. Nothing could stand against such a force. The humans might have tricks, but they could not defeat an armada of this size. "All ships," he broadcast across the fleet. "Target Earth. Fire on my command." But before he could give that command, his sensor operator made a sound of confusion. "Sir, I am detecting something." "Multiple somethings. They are just appearing out of nowhere." Rathzul's smile faded. On his tactical display, red icons began to multiply. 1 became 10, 10 became 50, 50 became 200. The human ships were appearing all around the coalition fleet, materializing out of what seemed like empty space. They had not jumped in. They had not flown in. They had simply appeared as if they had always been there and were only now choosing to be seen. 200 ships against 12,000, Rathzul said, forcing confidence into his voice. "We still have overwhelming numbers. All vessels engage." The coalition fleet opened fire with everything they had. Enough weapons to crack a planet, all directed at those 200 human vessels. The space between Earth and the fleet lit up with energy beams, missiles, and projectiles of every type the younger races had developed. Not a single shot hit its target. The human ships moved. They did not dodge in the way ships normally dodged, slow and ponderous, limited by inertia and the fragility of their crews. They moved like dancers, like water, like thought itself. They slipped between attacks that should have been impossible to avoid. They twisted through fields of fire that should have caught them. And as they moved, they fired back. The first human salvo was targeted, precise and devastating. 50 coalition ships lost power instantly. Their engines dead, their weapons offline, but their life support intact. The humans were still showing mercy, still capturing rather than killing. But Rathzul had not survived this long by being honorable. "Target their planet directly," he screamed. "If we cannot defeat their ships, we will force them to surrender." 1,000 ships turned their weapons toward Earth itself. Weapons that could burn continents. Weapons that could boil oceans. Weapons that could crack the planet's crust and end all life in a matter of hours. Admiral Chen watched from her command center and felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Not fear, not anger, but disappointment. They aim at our home, she said quietly. They threaten to murder billions of civilians. After everything we have done to avoid this. She looked at her crew, saw the same disappointment reflected in their eyes. Very well. They have made their choice. Show them Protocol 7. Captain Torres hesitated. Admiral, Protocol 7 has never been tested in combat. The simulation suggests it could. I know what it could do, Chen interrupted. But they have left us no choice. Execute Protocol 7. From Earth's moon, which humanity had turned into the largest fortress in the solar system, a single beam of light shot out. It was not particularly large. It was not particularly bright. But when it touched the first coalition ship, something impossible happened. The ship simply stopped. Not just stopped moving, stopped existing in the normal flow of time. It hung frozen in space, every particle locked in position, every atom suspended in an eternal moment. The beam swept across the coalition fleet like a searchlight, and everywhere it touched, ships froze. Not destroyed, not damaged, simply removed from time itself, preserved in that single instant forever. In 30 seconds, the beam had touched 500 ships, and then it stopped. That was a warning, Admiral Chen broadcast to the remaining fleet. Those ships are not destroyed. Their crews are not dead. They simply no longer exist in our timeline. We can return them, undo what was done, but only if you cease this attack immediately. Rathzul stared at his tactical display in horror. 500 ships gone, not destroyed where they could be mourned and avenged. Just gone, removed from reality as easily as erasing marks from a board. What are you? He whispered. We are human, came the reply. We are a species that had 50,000 years to think about what we did wrong. 50,000 years to develop technology not for conquest but for defense. 50,000 years to prepare for the day when someone forced us to remember what we once were. Another human voice joined the broadcast, older, carrying the weight of ages. It was Nexus Prime, speaking from the Concordat. Supreme Commander, this is Nexus Prime of the Council of Elders. I am watching your battle through quantum observation. I am begging you on behalf of every living thing in this galaxy. Surrender now. You do not understand what you are facing. We have 11,000 ships left. Rathazul shouted back. We can still win. No, Nexus Prime said, and his voice was filled with sorrow. You cannot. The weapon they just used is one of the weakest in their arsenal. It is the weapon they use when they want to be merciful. Admiral Chen is trying to save you. Please let her. But pride is a powerful thing, and the coalition had not come this far to surrender. The fleet pressed the attack and the human ships responded. For 3 months the battle raged across the Sol system. Not the swift, decisive fight that had destroyed the Kryn fleet, but a long, grinding campaign where humanity demonstrated, day after day, that they could end the fight whenever they chose but were giving the coalition every opportunity to surrender. Human ships captured rather than destroyed, human weapons disabled rather than killed, and slowly, day by day, the coalition began to fracture. Ship captains started to question their orders. Crews began to mutiny against commanders who would rather die than admit defeat. And refugees from coalition worlds, learning that humanity was offering sanctuary, began to flee to human-controlled space. That was when the truth came out. Many of the coalition governments were not the noble freedom fighters they claimed to be. They were dictatorships, slave-holding empires, regimes that ruled through fear and oppression. Their people had been looking for a way to escape for generations, and now humanity had given them that opportunity. Admiral Chen watched as more and more ships defected to the human side. She felt no joy in it. This was not how she had wanted things to go, but it was perhaps the best outcome they could hope for given the circumstances. And then the Kryn Empire, desperate and defeated, made their final mistake. The sensor alert came at 300 hours, a massive energy signature, jumping into the Sol system at high speed. Captain Torres brought up the visual, and every human in the command center felt their blood run cold. It is a star killer, Torres said, his voice shaking. They are going to destroy the sun. A star killer was a weapon so terrible that it was banned by every civilized race in the galaxy. It was a self-sustaining fusion reaction designed to be fired into a star, causing it to go nova. It would destroy not just Earth but every planet in the system, and the explosion would be visible from 1,000 light-years away. "Time to impact?" Admiral Chen asked, her voice steady despite the horror of what was coming. 17 minutes. Chen closed her eyes. She had hoped it would not come to this, had prayed that the coalition would surrender before they forced humanity to show their true capability. But now there was no choice. "Launch the Prometheus Unbound," she ordered. "Authorization Chen Alpha 77, full release of the Omega Protocol." Every human in the command center stood at attention. They knew what the Prometheus Unbound was. It was humanity's answer to the question of what happens when all other options are exhausted. It was the ship they had hoped never to launch. From a hidden dock on the far side of the moon, a single vessel emerged. It was small, no larger than a fighter craft, but it radiated power that made the sensors scream. It accelerated toward the incoming Starkiller, moving faster than anything should be able to move. The Starkiller weapon was massive, the size of a small moon, burning with stolen stellar fire. The Prometheus Unbound was a tiny speck in comparison, and yet when they met, it was the Starkiller that died. The human ship did not destroy it. It absorbed it. Every bit of energy, every particle of matter, every quantum of power that had been meant to kill the sun was drawn into the Prometheus Unbound and converted, transformed, rendered harmless through technology that made even the Elders' science seem primitive. And then, with casual ease, the Prometheus Unbound redirected that energy. It fired the combined power of a dying star into empty space, into a nebula light-years away where it would harm no one. The nebula lit up, glowing with new stellar birth, and across the galaxy scientists watched in awe as humanity turned a weapon of genocide into an act of creation. Admiral Chen broadcast one final message to the Coalition fleet. "This is why we chose sleep. This is why the Elders warned you. We are not your enemies unless you make us so. We are not monsters unless you force us to remember how to be monsters. We have shown you mercy at every turn. We have given you every chance to surrender. But understand this, we can defend ourselves. We can defend our home. And if you force us to choose between peace and survival, we will choose survival. Every single time." The Coalition fleet surrendered 3 hours later. Every remaining ship powered down their weapons and accepted human terms. Supreme Commander Rathazul was arrested by his own officers and handed over to humanity for judgment. The war was over, but its consequences were just beginning. 6 years had passed since the war ended. The galaxy was a different place now, and in ways that no one could have predicted when the Coalition fleet had first jumped into the Sol system. The Galactic Concordat had been rebuilt, restructured, and reformed. The great chamber where the Council of Elders once sat alone now had new seats arranged in a circle, representing true equality among all species. And at one of those seats, wearing the simple dark blue uniform that had become her trademark, sat Admiral Chen. She looked older now. Not physically. Human longevity treatments kept her as healthy as she had been when she woke from 50,000 years of sleep, but her eyes carried a weight that came from hard choices and harder victories. Today was the anniversary of the war's end, and representatives from every concordant world had gathered to commemorate it. But this was not a celebration of victory. It was a remembrance of lessons learned. Ambassador Zekthar, the Kryn who had pushed so hard for the expedition to Earth, stood to speak. His scales had lost their luster, and he moved like someone carrying a great burden. 6 years ago, he began, his voice humble, I stood in this chamber and dismissed the warnings of the Elders. I called them superstition. I called them fear. I was wrong. He paused, struggling with the words. The Kryn Empire lost nearly its entire fleet in this war. But more than that, we lost our pride, our certainty that might made right. And in losing those things, we found something better. We found wisdom. He sat down to respectful silence. Others spoke after him. Former coalition members, now free democracies, talked about how human intervention had helped them overthrow tyrannical governments. Species that had been enslaved by the coalition spoke of their liberation. Even some who had fought against humanity admitted that the war had changed them for the better. When it was Admiral Chen's turn to speak, she stood slowly. The chamber fell silent. I want to tell you a story, she began. 50,000 years ago, humanity discovered that we had accidentally killed 17 worlds. Billions of people, gone because we did not understand our own weapons. We were horrified. We were ashamed. And we made a choice. She walked to the center of the chamber where a holographic display showed the current state of the galaxy. We could have blamed the aliens who attacked us. We could have said it was self-defense, that it was not our fault. But we did not. We looked at the dead worlds and we understood that regardless of who started the war, we were responsible for how we chose to end it. And so we made a promise. Never again would we bring unprovoked war to the stars. The display changed, showing Earth alone in its quarantine. We went home. We destroyed our weapons, and we went to sleep hoping to wake up wiser. But we are not fools. We knew that isolation was not guaranteed. We knew that someday someone might force us to wake up. So we prepared. For 50,000 years we studied, we built, and we planned. Not for conquest, not for revenge, but for defense. The display changed again, showing the battles of the recent war. When the Kryn came, we disabled their ships. We did not destroy them. When the coalition attacked, we captured rather than killed. Even when they aimed weapons at our home, at billions of our people, we held back. We showed mercy at every turn. She paused. Not because we are soft, not because we are weak, but because we remember what happens when power is used without restraint. Admiral Chen looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from dozens of worlds. We are not perfect. We made mistakes during the war. People died who should not have died, but we tried. We tried to remember that our enemies were not monsters, but people making bad choices. We tried to give them every opportunity to choose peace instead of war. She returned to her seat, but she was not quite finished. The elders warned you not to wake us. They were right to do so, not because we are evil, but because we represent a choice the galaxy had to make. Would you listen to wisdom and experience? Would you respect the boundaries we set? Or would you let pride and greed guide you? She looked at the council of elders who sat in their places of honor. You chose poorly, but we forgave you, and in forgiving you, we taught you. That is the purpose of power. Not to dominate, but to teach. Kalessa, the ancient crystal being who had warned the Concordat so many times, rose to speak. Her light was brighter now, no longer dimmed with dread. 6 years ago, I was certain we would all die, she said. I was certain that in waking humanity, we had doomed ourselves to the same fate as those 17 worlds from ancient history. I was wrong. She gestured to Admiral Chen with something that might have been respect or might have been relief. Humanity has changed. They have learned. In 50,000 years, they have become what they always had the potential to be. Not conquerors, not destroyers, but guardians. They could have taken control of the galaxy. They had the power. But instead, they have chosen to share it. It was true. In the 6 years since the war, humanity had done something unprecedented. They had released all prisoners of war, provided aid to rebuild damaged worlds, and offered technology-sharing agreements with no strings attached. The time-frozen ships had been returned to normal space, their crews unharmed. Even Supreme Commander Rathzul, who had ordered the Starkiller attack, had been given a fair trial and sentenced not to death, but to community service, helping rebuild the worlds his war had damaged. The Terran Accords, Nexus Prime said, speaking for the first time in the session, that is what they are calling the new laws. Equality for all species, abolition of slavery throughout the galaxy, wars of conquest forbidden, democratic governance encouraged. And at the center of it all, humanity standing as guarantors. Not rulers, Admiral Chen interjected quickly. Guarantors. There is a difference. We do not seek to control you. We seek to protect you from external threats, and sometimes to protect you from yourselves. The meeting continued for hours, discussing the practical details of the new galaxy they were building together. Trade agreements were signed. Defense pacts were formed. Scientific collaboration was organized. And through it all, humanity worked to ensure that every species had an equal voice, an equal chance, an equal future. As the session finally ended and the representatives began to file out, Kalessa approached Admiral Chen. The ancient being looked at the human with something like affection. Thank you, Kalessa said simply, for showing restraint, for remembering mercy, for being better than we feared. Chen smiled, but it was a tired smile. We almost failed. There were moments during the war when I wanted to just end it, to show the coalition everything we had, to make them surrender through overwhelming force. It would have been easier. But you did not, Kalessa said. That is what matters. You chose the hard path, the right path. We chose the path that let us look at ourselves in the mirror, Chen replied. That is all any of us can do. Later that day, Admiral Chen returned to Earth for the first time in months. She went to a place that few others knew about. A garden built into the side of a mountain, carefully maintained, filled with 17 different types of trees. Each tree represented one of the worlds that humanity had destroyed so long ago. It was called the Garden of Remembrance, and every human visited it at least once in their life. It was their reminder, their shame, their promise. Chen walked through the garden slowly, touching each tree, remembering the names of the worlds. Tharashan, Felmore, Kritak, names preserved for 50,000 years, never forgotten, never forgiven. A child was there, no more than 8 years old, holding her grandfather's hand. The old man wore military insignia marking him as a veteran of the Coalition War. The child looked up at Admiral Chen with wide eyes. Are you Admiral Chen? The girl asked. The one from the stories? Chen knelt down to the child's level. I am. What is your name? Sophia. My grandfather says you saved the galaxy. Your grandfather is kind, Chen said, glancing at the old veteran, who nodded respectfully. But the truth is more complicated. Why did we fight if we wanted peace? Sophia asked, her young mind trying to understand something that even adults struggled with. Chen looked at the trees around them, these living monuments to humanity's greatest shame and greatest lesson. She chose her words carefully. Sometimes, little one, the only way to achieve lasting peace is to show those who would disturb it exactly why they should not. We are not warriors by choice. We are warriors by necessity, and that makes all the difference. But you did not want to fight? No, Chen said softly. We never wanted to fight. That is why we came here to this garden to remember. These trees represent worlds that died because we did not understand our own power. We never want to forget that. We never want to become comfortable with violence. The moment we become comfortable with it, the moment we start to enjoy it, is the moment we become the monsters we fear. Sophia thought about this, her young face serious. So you fight to protect people, but you do not like fighting? Exactly, Chen said, standing up. We fight because we must, but we never forget what it costs. That is what makes us different from conquerors. Conquerors fight because they want to. We fight because we have to. And we always try to find another way first. The grandfather spoke then, his voice gruff with emotion. Admiral, I fought against you at the Battle of Titan Ridge. My ship was disabled by your weapons. You could have killed us all. Instead, you captured us, healed our wounded, and sent us home with a message of peace. I remember, Chen said. 4th Drex Cruiser Wing. You were one of the first units to defect. Because of your mercy, the old veteran said. I was told humans were monsters. But monsters do not spare their enemies. Monsters do not heal wounds. Monsters do not send prisoners home to their families. He saluted, military to military. Thank you for teaching us what real strength looks like. As Chen left the garden, she looked back one last time at the 17 trees, standing tall and green against the sky. They had been planted 50,000 years ago, and they would stand for 50,000 more. A reminder, a promise, a warning. The galaxy had chosen silence when they should have listened to the elders' warnings. But humanity had chosen mercy when they could have chosen vengeance. And in that choice, in that moment of restraint, they had created something new. A galaxy where power was balanced with wisdom, where strength was tempered with compassion, where the mistakes of the past were remembered so they would never be repeated. Admiral Chen looked up at the stars, at the ships that now protected the galaxy, at the civilization humanity had helped rebuild. They had been asleep for 50,000 years. They had hoped never to wake. But now that they were awake, now that they had been forced to remember what they were capable of, they had made a new promise. Never again would they sleep. Never again would they hide. They would stand as guardians, protecting the galaxy from threats both external and internal. Not as rulers, not as conquerors, but as the watchful defenders that the elders had always hoped they would become. The long sleep was over. Humanity was awake, and the galaxy was better for it.